Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the ALS United Mid Atlantic Goals podcast. I'm Tony Heil with ALS United Mid Atlantic, and I'm excited to talk to my guest today, a young person who's very involved in ALS research. Her name is Yentli Soto Albrecht, PhD, and we're going to talk a lot about the genetic ALS in her family, her work on research, and some of the things she's doing on social media to bring attention to ALS. Before I get into our discussion, I want to remind you to look at our past episodes where we talked with researchers, doctors, care services staff like our nurses and social workers, people who have been impacted by ALS, whether they're living with it or they've lost someone to ALS or they're a caregiver, and even people outside of the ALS community who join us in wanting to fund scientific research at the national level. Yentli has great scientific experience. She is an expert at learning about genetic ALS and about the research that's happening and why it's so important to keep our foot on the accelerator when it comes to funding and advancing research, participating in studies, connecting with researchers around the globe so that those connections and collaborations can lead us to new treatments and cures for this disease. So I'm really excited for the work she's doing. Yentli, thank you so much for talking today.
It's really a pleasure to be here, Tony. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I started following you on social media, which is how I know a lot of people, it seems. And I know that you are from the area, so I hadn't connected with you before seeing that. Um, so what? Tell us about how ALS first touched your life before I get too deep in anything else.
Yeah. Well, actually, in order to answer that question, I have to go all the way back to 2016. My aunt, Judy Albright, was diagnosed with ALS then in Maryland. And at that time, she was told that it wasn't genetic or familial. And that was the first incidence of ALS in our family. And she died in 2019, 2.5 years later. And it was really devastating to see my family member go through that. My dad at the time, Frank Albright, would travel and help take care of her during that time. But then the summer of 2023, when I was 1 year away from finishing my PhD, I'm an MD PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania, my dad had foot drop. And we didn't really think too much about that until he, my mom texted me saying, I'm worried that this could be ALS. And then kind of a light bulb, kind of the worst kind of light bulb went off in my head.
Right.
And I was able to connect him with the neurologist. He was examined, and honestly, within just a couple of hours, we knew that it was ALS because he had signs on EMG of ALS. He had signs on physical exam. And then with his sister having ALS as well, that strong family history of an autosomal dominant pattern of inheritance, which means you just need one copy and 50% of anyone who's on that side of the family could have the gene. It was really slam dunk. He was a very rapid progressor, even faster than his sister. And he went from, just his foot not picking up off the ground to needing a walker a couple months later, and then a wheelchair. And then his lungs were affected about 8 months into his diagnosis. And he died 14 months even since his first symptom. And he died in my arms, struggling to breathe. And it was really, really difficult because at that time, I also knew that I carried the same gene that was causing his disease.
Thank you so much for being so brave about sharing that. And I know the word bravery is kind of thrown around in lots of different diseases, but it takes a lot of vulnerability to share that. And you've been sharing a lot on social media. What made you want to get onto social media like TikTok and other channels to be so open about your story when it's a very difficult thing to talk about?
Yeah. And thanks for asking that question because, I actually, even even after pivoting into the field and starting to go to conferences and develop projects, I was still closed about being a genetic carrier myself. I would say I'm fighting for my family, but then obviously when the conversation becomes I'm fighting for myself, the journey kind of changes a little bit. Um, I realized that being both a patient and a doctor in training and a scientist, I guess threefold identity is a really powerful combination. And that I wanted patients to know that when we as scientists are asking you to give samples, when we're asking you to be involved in observational trials, when we're asking, ALS patients to travel really far to participate in trials and undergo lumbar punctures and all these things that are painful or inconvenient, that we're not asking you to do anything we wouldn't do ourselves. And I thought it was really important to connect those two concepts. In fact, the reason why I'm in Boston right now is because this is where I do my observational pre-symptomatic ALS trial with Dials at Massachusetts General Hospital. And tomorrow I'm going to have blood tests. I'm going to have muscle strength testing, some cognitive tests, and I'm going to get a lumbar puncture as well. So I put my money, I put my time, my energy where my mouth is, and I um, I always advocate for people to participate in research if they can, because it's the best way to move the needle forward.
And a lot of our folks are not sure how to participate in research. I was talking with some of our patients and caregivers yesterday about this, and they really care about research, but they don't know if they qualify, maybe if they should because of the nature of their disease. What do you tell people who want to know what should I do?
That's a really excellent question, Tony. And I do want to preface this by saying, um, if you're an ALS patient and for whatever reason, whether it's your priorities are to finish work or to spend time with your family, and you don't want to participate in research, that's okay. In fact, my dad was not in any clinical trials. Okay, he could have been, but he didn't want lumbar punctures, and he didn't want to travel. He wanted to finish the year as a teacher. And by God, did he do that to the best of his ability? And there's really no problem to do that. Okay. But if you are a symptomatic ALS patient, then I recommend that you work with North Star. It's a free, recent NGO that was just developed to help people like you navigate the clinical trial system. And I also know that organizations like ALS, TDI, and Everything ALS are using AI to develop apps. And whether they're available now or are going to be available soon, you'll be able to actually look up trial in your regions by saying, I'm a 56-year-old ALS patient with bulbar onset. I've had it for 4 months. I'm on these medications. What trials am I eligible for? And what do they require of me? And so the AI is being used now to be able to help you navigate. But I do know that North Star has, in a personalized way right now, it's free and it's helping ALS patients guide the clinical trial system. If you're a pre-symptomatic carrier, I recommend that you get plugged in with End the Legacy. I'm actually community science liaison fellow for End the Legacy. And this is the organization for pre-symptomatic people or people affected by familial ALS and FTD. And there's a really easy website you can go to research opportunities. I'll quickly list the ones that I'm in because those are the ones I know the best. There's All ALS Prevent, which is what Dials is converting into, and that has sites all over the U.S. And it's relatively new, but we just got more funding, so that's fantastic. That if you're a symptomatic patient, you can be part of that trial too, and if you're pre-symptomatic, you just go to the Prevent arm of All ALS. All FTD, similar. There's for pre-symptomatic carriers like me, and for people who have FTD currently. And then, of course, you can sign up as a control if you're a caregiver or a loved one, and or if you're in a family but you don't have the gene but you want to help fight. And then there's ALS TDI ARC study. That one doesn't involve traveling to centers. That one just involves some surveys, and then they send you a kit and a phlebotomist to do a blood test for you at home, and then the phlebotomist actually sends it back, and you don't have to worry about that at all. And there, you also wear a watch and you do some digital biomarker things. And then Everything ALS, which collects digital biomarker data like speech and movement as well. And something that I'm excited about is partnering with them to help power prevention studies. So what we're doing is actually we're acquiring these digital biomarker data of speech and wearing a watch in pre-symptomatic carriers like me, and people in my family who could be affected. And we're trying to collect the same clinical endpoints that clinical biomarkers that are being used in symptomatic ALS trials now. So someday we can go to regulatory bodies and say, hey, we would like you to monitor pre-symptomatic carriers for these digital biomarkers. Instead of looking at whether or not we get disease, just look at how our speech and movement tracks. And please give us medications to help prevent these diseases in our lives. I hope I explained that. I'm happy to rehash it, but it's really important to know kind of what the trial options are in your area.
Yeah, and it's good to know that they're not necessarily overwhelming or burdensome. I talked with Carol Hamilton from ALS TDI on this podcast last year, and we talked about that study and about some of the very simple ways, like just recording your voice over and over, not constantly, but just so over time you can see the
Mhm.
changes. And I think that for people who have had a loved one with ALS, when you hear that, you're like, oh, yeah, I understand that because my grandfather had ALS, and I still, 20 years later, remember how his voice changed over time as he lost the strength to talk. And so if you can see that with earlier in his diagnosis, maybe we would have known things earlier and tracked things in a way if we had this kind of information 20 years ago.
Yes, and that's a really good point, Tony. And I'll also say ALS TDI does this, and so does everything ALS. They'll actually give you your recordings. And so in the future, if there is a trial eligibility based on speech pathology that machine learning and AI can pick up, but your loved ones can't, you are actually empowering your own ability to be in a trial by collecting data. And it's great. You don't have to do it yourself. You're working with these organizations. They have their own software. They walk you through it. They send you reminders to collect it on a regular basis every few months. It's really empowering, honestly, as a patient to be able to do that.
And you mentioned All ALS. I did a podcast with them a few months ago, and there's some wonderful young women who are working on that project, who are scientists and doing some studies on there. You're a younger person working on ALS as well, and I think it's really neat to see more young people focusing their professional development and their expertise on this disease and on neurology in general. What do you see about the future of young people being involved in ALS and the science of it?
No, I think it's really important. And there's a role for people that are affected to participate by giving samples, but also if you want to like read about the research yourself and help educate the community. And help explain the science to them. That's really beautiful. And then, of course, as a woman in science, I think it's awesome that we just as men, just as anyone else, are able to become physician scientists and train an MD and PhD. So there's really an opportunity to be involved in research in kind of every sense of the word. Um, I I'm involved as kind of a mechanism for my survival. But I do think that it's helpful that I enjoy reading about the biology. And at C9orf72, the repeat expansion, which is the gene that I carry, is something that's particularly challenging at a molecular level. And so that's something that kind of wakes me up in the morning thinking about, oh gosh, like what can we learn from all of the aggregates or junk that builds up in our cells, and how can we use that to maybe be able to predict ALS versus FTD someday, or how can we use it for biomarkers, or which ones do we have to get rid of in order to treat disease? Like I it's really exciting to have an understanding of the biology at that level, and then appreciate what it's like to treat patients with the gene, as a physician in training, and then as a patient myself. There's nothing more, instigating is the wrong word, but like invigorating than having it tied to your own survival. It's like, why would I not do this? It's gonna help move the needle.
I appreciate that greatly. And while I hopefully don't have genetic ALS in my family, I know I had ALS in my family, and I had a family member with Parkinson's as well. So we try and, when I can see collaboration or supporting both those things. But I think if you're working in healthcare and research or medicine in general, no matter what, you're working for your own survival because we all are patients at some level, right? Like, it's okay for it to have some level of self interest, even if you're going to be an ear, nose, and throat doctor. You're going to need
Yeah,
an ear, nose, and throat doctor at some point.
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely right. It's like, taking charge of your own destiny with science. There's something really beautiful about it.
And you mentioned having women in science and women in healthcare. It reminds me of my friend Gary's story. And yes, Gary's a man, but his wife had ALS. And it took her a long time to be diagnosed, even though she knew that it was ALS because her father had had ALS. And she and him were very convinced that the doctors did not take her symptoms seriously because she was a woman and they didn't think that it was as likely for her for whatever reason. And do you think that having more women in science and in research can help break down those prejudices to help women who will be diagnosed with the diseases like ALS?
Absolutely. And there's so much that we don't understand, actually, even related to sex differences in these diseases. Um, we think that maybe there's something like um, your possibly your pregnancy history, which can modulate your risk of developing breast cancer or uterine cancer. Um, that kind of same thing may also be modulating your risk of developing a form ALS if you have it in your family, and certainly what age at which you develop it and how fast it goes. I mean, so having women in science, not only do we think outside the box, but we're also like, hey, we need to answer these questions. And maybe if we understood it better, then we could empower people to kind of take control of their health.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different questions that might not be asked if we don't have more diversity in research, whatever that diversity is,
Yeah.
because otherwise people are not thinking of the things that could be impacting the trajectory of a disease. And like you said, if you're a woman with ALS or that are exposed to it, like it's in your family, it might present for you one way, whereas for your a brother or a father in your family it might present a whole different way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I also want to kind of to touch back on another theme, which is like for a young woman, a young person in science today, what can we really do to move the needle? And I would say that whether you believed that you yourself had the capability of moving the needle, I would say the fact that I'm starting to, after just 1 year in this field, is evidence that yes, like someone who is still training and is able to kind of raise a ruckus about how important it is for us to advance different stages of the pipeline to be able to get treatments to prevent these diseases and familial ALS and FTD is that there is merit to starting at any time, and that your voice matters at any age. And I think that that's just something that's been very validating for me. I mean, I still think that scientists may understand that there's maybe these discrepancies in the clinical space for ALS and FTD, but it's not until you're a patient with that lived experience that it really starts to feel unfair. And I'll just give kind of two examples. My C9orf72 repeat expansion is the most common cause of familial ALS and FTD. And actually, if you take sporadic ALS and FTD, which means it's not tracking in families, it also causes the biggest genetic cause of genetic sporadic ALS and FTD. So it's this mutation is just like if you were able to solve this, it would just make a big difference for ALS and FTD fields. And so what's crazy is that in order for me at this point to get a treatment in my body for ALS or FTD, I'd have to get ALS because there's no FTD trials um, for for something that isn't progranulin, like not tied to another genetic cause of FTD. I would not be eligible, even though the same gene is causing ALS and FTD. I'd have to get ALS, not FTD, in order to get an experimental treatment that might be able to save my life. I mean, I think that's kind of nuts, right?
Hmm.
And then the other thing is that even if I had an elevation in neurofilament light chain, which is the best biomarker that we have right now, then even if based on Dr. Benatar's recent data, we know that neurodegeneration, either ALS or FTD, is maybe 1 to 3 years away. I would still not be eligible to receive a drug to prevent disease. I still need to have a clinical diagnosis of ALS, not FTD, in order to be in a trial. So prevention is, and people keep writing about how prevention trials are on the horizon, but it's crazy that we have a biomarker and still I need to have enough neurons dying of one of the two diseases I'm predisposed to in order to receive treatment. I mean, that's just unfair. And I'm going to fight tooth and nail in order to change the tide as soon as possible for families being affected by these diseases.
I appreciate that. Because whether it is early diagnosis or prevention because it's in your family, that will save the healthcare industry so much money if you're able to get treatments earlier so you never need a power wheelchair, you never need another device, you never need the other expensive health treatments, whatever that preventive care would be, whether it's a drug treatment, genetic therapy, whatever it is. I'm not the expert that you are.
Yeah.
It ends up saving money in the long run to do this earlier.
That's right. And I think I think there's so many ways in which accelerating treatment for C9 or 72 ALS and FTD and other genetic causes is going to help sporadic as well. I mean, it's possible that the same treatment's going to work for both, but it's possible that, as is with some Alzheimer's drugs that are showing promise now, that you only see an effect the earliest that you treat people. Okay. So, for example, for some of the Alzheimer's drugs, you need to treat in the mild cognitive decline phase, which is before some people even go to their doctor saying, I think I have a problem. So that pushes a whole field to develop better biomarkers and get people access to treatments even earlier. And so if we are able to this is kind of where my thinking goes, that if we're able to prevent ALS or FTD in a presymptomatic carrier that is in that prodromal phase, we know they're going to convert, but we can prevent it. That tells us that that drug works to completely stop ALS if given sooner. And now that pushes us to develop the best biomarkers even faster so that we can get the drug to ALS and FTD patients faster.
And we recently had an approval for Casaldi or Tofersen for SOD1. And when I see that, I see so much hope because I've known many people who have been impacted by the SOD1 mutation. Obviously, it's different from your genetic mutation. But when you see that progress and some other therapies that have been on the horizon or passed in the last 10 years, does that give you excitement and hope about what could be possible?
Yes, it does. And actually, it's part of what one of my projects is a search for a self-cure video series where I interview scientists and I bring the science to patients in ways that they can understand in lay terms. And recently, I interviewed Dr. Dan Mordes, who's a neuropathologist at UCSF and runs his own lab there. And he made the excellent point that the fact that the same approach that worked for SOD1, tofersen, that ASO or antisense oligonucleotide failed for C9orf72, it still puts us in a better place than we were before. Because A, we know that that strategy is not the winning one. Great. Now we can go back to the drawing board. But it also tells us that we can quickly leverage a strategy that is working for SOD1 ALS or for another genetic cause into another genetic cause of ALS and FTD. So that it's a proof of concept, even if we learn that that wasn't the same biological approach that we should use, that we can do it and we can do it fast. So I think there's a lot of hope. And instead of looking at that and feeling devastated, I look at that failed trial and I'm hopeful that we're going to do better next time.
I think about it like video games, where if you play a video game and you know that if you're a character and you jump on someone's head, then that defeats them. And so you know, okay, that works, but maybe it only works in a certain way on another character. But it's a proof that, okay, this is what I need to do. And whether it's later in the game or in a different game, you understand the mechanics of how to play on that system. It's the same thing with ALS,
Yeah.
where, or any disease, where, okay, if it worked for this one gene, it can work in a different way if we just think about it and plan for how it looks here.
That's right. And I also want to emphasize that a lot of the lessons that we learned from studying genetic ALS and FTD are transferable to sporadic forms too. As we develop better biomarker approaches for these diseases to be able to predict their onset, well, a lot of these same strategies are leveraged exactly the same way to diagnose sporadic ALS and FTD earlier. In fact, two of my projects, one of which was funded through the ALS Network, ALS United, the Innovation Award was with Daniel Heller and Stanislav at MSK on using carbon walled nanotubes to develop a better biomarker approach for ALS. And so there we can leverage that technology in ALS versus control blood samples. We can leverage it in ALS versus FTD samples of the same genetic cause. We can leverage it in people who are predisposed to ALS, but don't have disease yet versus have disease. And so that kind of approach, I hopefully will start unlocking a lot of doors for us. And I'm also helping another collaborator in his approach to develop biomarkers of ALS progression. So that would allow us to not just predict someone has ALS versus doesn't have ALS, but also this person might be a faster progressor than others, because we know that ALS is very varied in how long you can live with it. You can live with it for 6 months or less, or for 30 years. And this is not something that's just going to be handed out willy-nilly to families, but some families want to know, and certainly that can help families decide on planning how to budget caregiving or resources, or help patients be able to take control of the time that they have left, but also enable people to make decisions about what kind of clinical trials they want to be in. And hopefully it also helps clinical trials stratify patients better too, so that they can look at an effect change within a subgroup of ALS. So I'm mindful both about the technology that we would deploy, but as a doctor in training, I'm also mindful about the impact on the patients. And as a caregiver and current patient and possibly future patient myself, I'm mindful of the impact it would have on my own future.
And I also want to talk about the impact of your videos and social media, because I've found it very compelling. You have a really great, approachable way of communicating, as hopefully anyone listening here can tell. How has that been received? Has it been really helpful in terms of engaging with the public about ALS, and getting good feedback from posting videos? And would you encourage others to be willing to share their story, because we've seen the power of that so many times online?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for asking that, Tony. Um, you know, I just want to emphasize that it's really a personal decision to be forthcoming about your genetic mutation, or a disease. And it certainly isn't necessary. It may help with advocacy efforts, but there are ways to be an advocate that don't involve this. And for some people, it could be damaging to mental health. It could be damaging to personal relationships. It could even, and this should not be the case, but it could be damaging to your ability to get health, or, well, certainly life insurance, and hopefully never health insurance. But really, those are things that you kind of um, are risks of being open. And so I'm cognizant of these, and I don't want to force anyone to. But what I will say is that this happened because a friend of mine helped me start a TikTok. Her name is Brooke Emmerich, and she is engaged in the End the Legacy community, as well as being affected by familial ALS FTD in her family. And so she helps run this TikTok and does a lot of the work. And there was a video that went viral on there. It's one where I turn to the camera in a blue jumper and say, "I'm going to get ALS unless I cure it." And it's really just it's allowed people to connect with my video. I would say, yeah, because it has like 1.5 million views. I find kind of the responses um, interesting, in that some people are like, "Wow, ALS can be familial," and I'm like, "Yeah, it really sucks." But then there's also people coming out of the woodwork being like, "Oh, I've had multiple cases of these diseases in my family. Could I be impacted?" And it's not up to me to make any counseling. I don't counsel on social media, and I certainly don't give medical advice, but I can connect it with End the Legacy, because there's a free genetic counselor. They have office hours. You can go and free of charge talk to someone who can then counsel you on what your options are to kind of take charge of your future. And it also enables me to connect with people that just need to see the work that's happening out there, and have it accessible to them. And so it's really been an incredible way of connecting with people who find hope in seeing the future of science out there. And so I'll continue working with volunteers to put out content, and because I consider this peer community of mine just really important. And you guys are the future of being able to turn the tide. Like, if everyone stopped giving samples and participating in observational studies, we would have nothing, and we would go nowhere. But it also enables me to tie the asks that we have from the community, the asks from scientists and doctors of like, will you participate in these trials, to the science that is being um, generated from these samples. And so it's really just an honor to be able to bridge all of these identities and kind of leverage it in a way to support the ALS and FTD community in this way.
Yeah, it's harder to say no to caring about something when it's got a face to it. It's one thing to say, "Can you support science?" Like, of course, but it's another to support gently. It's another to support this person. Well, okay, well, that's a real person impacted by this. Now, I get to see you in person in a month at our
Yeah,
Help and Hope event, April 9th. It's in King of Prussia. You can go on our website, helpandhopeals.org, to find out more about how to join us. We're going to have some great speakers, including a panel that's bringing together diseases, including ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and FTD. So I'm really excited to see you there. I
awesome.
know that the day before you're also going to be busy working on this cause because
Yeah.
you're spending a lot of time on it, and I want to give you a chance to talk about other work you're doing at that same time.
Sure. So I think if you want to think of April 8th and 9th as an opportunity to fight ALS FTD and educate yourself kind of in tandem, then you could try to go to both events. So the day before this event, which I will also be joining Tony and his team at, I will be helping to run a Push Up for ALS research fundraiser. And there are many ways to be involved that both involve going to this event in memory of my dad on the McCaskey High School campus where he worked as a teacher, or just participating on social media. So you can sign up and participate in a team to do push-ups and have people pledge money for push-ups. You can buy T-shirts that say push-ups for ALS, fund a cure. And we could actually even raise $10,000 just by T-shirt sales themselves, which is really amazing. And then you can, if you can't do push-ups, you can pledge to pay a couple cents or dollars per push-up that your team is able to accomplish on this push-up challenge competition day of. But it's also going to be a really fun event. There will be vendors, there'll be food and food trucks, and there will be a percentage of the proceeds from those sales as well that go to fund ALS research. 100% of the money we raise, there's no overhead costs. 100% goes to ALS research. It's decided by a team of ALS genetic carriers that are predisposed to ALS and FTD. And likely we will co-fund a grant with a large ALS research organization, unless we make millions, and then we'll expand the panel and have scientists submit research proposals, and we'll fund them ourselves. And all the money that you donate is tax deductible. And you can go to pushupsforals.org, and there is the donate link, and opportunity to sign up for teams. We're trying to do a little bit of like an ice bucket challenge thing. So there may be an opportunity to get pinged by someone to do push-ups. ALS patients, I know I thought about the fact that we're asking people to do push-ups, but I will say my dad did as many push-ups as his age until the year he was diagnosed with ALS. And even living with ALS, he did them until he couldn't get out of his wheelchair and then back in, because his upper body strength is what went last. So it's really in his memory, both in its location, the fact that there's going to be an early dismissal at the high school where he's worked, so the students he cared for are going to be there, but then also in the spirit of, if you're physically able and you're not affected by ALS yet or don't have it, then support those of us, patients that aren't able to fight in this way and participate in this challenge.
So I know you talked about end the legacy, but you really are continuing the legacy of your father in the best way possible, continuing his relationship as a teacher and a father and a human being. That's a really nice tribute. It's not, I mean, it's great to have like an event where you're just having drinks, and we want people to do that, but it's nice that's so unique to him. So thank you for doing that. The website, which should be in our description here, and I've been following it as well. Um, Before we finish here, we just had a conversation with our mental health professional about all sorts of issues because it's such an important topic, including burnout. You are devoting so much of your time to this. I imagine that you like things other than ALS. It's not like the
Yeah.
only thing you do. Do you watch any like? Please tell me the only TV you watch is not ALS related TV. Like you get a break from it somewhat.
Okay.
So
I know,
let people
Tony.
know
I
what
mean,
else you
that's a
enjoy.
really good question. I can't promise you that right now because I'm watching like videos of conferences, and webinars that I wasn't able to go to, like, while I'm brushing my teeth at night. But but I do have hobbies, and they involve bouldering in at indoor climbing gyms, which I'll do later today. And on Instagram, I post bouldering videos every time I do it. I get this delight that like my body still works, even though it might not always, But I just love bouldering, and I'm very careful not to hit my head. Don't hit your head, especially if you're genetically predisposed to ALS FTD. And then I also do salsa dancing. I can do salsa, merengue, bachata, and I'm learning zouk, which is Brazilian form. And so I do that socially, and it also just makes me really happy. And then I have a wonderful husband. We spend time together, and he's also incredibly supportive of all of these projects. And he was helping me set up this camera on the phone just before. So Sam Riegel, thank you for being my partner in crime for every stage of our fight together.
So that's great. And if you like indoor rock climbing, we have a great indoor rock climbing gym in Bridgeport, Pennsylvania at Reach Fitness. So maybe we could do something together. We'll do some special event because
We
an
could.
impressive venue at Reach Fitness. That's for sure.
Yeah, we can fund a cure for ALS that way.
Well, we'll talk later. So, love to learn more. So, if you're listening to this podcast, again, look back at past episodes to hear from other perspectives on people who have been impacted by this disease. I could talk to Gently for the next 3 hours, but um, I'm going to get more tired than her probably talking. So please go there to learn more and visit our website, alsmidatlantic.org, if you're in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Delaware, to connect with our services, learn about research, find out about your social worker, and support our mission. Thank you so much, Gently. I look forward to seeing you in person and working with you, not just in the next month, but I think for many months to come.
Yeah, we have to change the tide, right? We need to make ALS and FTD survivable, treatable diseases where people can live just like they deserve to.
Not only do we have to do it, we will do it, and we'll do it together.
We will. Yep. Thank you so much, Tony.